I've never seen a more disappointing fight than the one between Kirsch and Morrow in this finale. Ever since they met in the Maginot, the tension has always been there. It's like watching two predators circling around each other, or two men who couldn't exist in the same space without testing each other. And I guess the elevator scene was when it became very clear that these people really do not like each other. And it was also the first signal that this was never going to end quietly. And the show kept feeding into it. Every time they crossed paths, it felt like a setup for the real collision. Kirsch, always so calm and clinical, running his experiments, watching people like they were test subjects. Morrow, on the other hand, was the opposite. He is fiery, instinctive, and threatening to tear everything down just to prove he could. It was clear these two weren't built to coexist, and sooner or later, something had to give. Also, last episode made that promise even louder. When Morrow said this isn't over and Kirsch has responded by saying nothing ever really is, it kind of sealed the deal that this wasn't just any setup anymore. It was a contract with the audience that these two would clash, and the way it was framed, it felt like it had to be one for the books. So on paper, this was supposed to be explosive. A showdown between a cyborg enforcer and a synthetic strategist. So you have muscle versus machine, or raw force versus cold precision. All the ingredients were there for a fight that could reshape the finale and raise the stakes for season 2. And the fans weren't crazy to expect fireworks, because the writing had been telegraphing it for weeks. But when the moment finally arrived, it felt smaller, messier, and almost undercut by its own buildup. Instead of the definitive clash the setup promised, what we got was an anticlimax. And it wasn't that nothing happened, the blows were there and so was the tension. But the fight never reached the scale the story had led us to expect. This wasn't a clash that shook the foundation of Neverland. It felt like two men scrambling in a lab, breaking furniture and trading short bursts of dominance. And as soon as it started to feel like one might pull ahead, the fight collapsed under its own weight. And I think that's why so many fans walked away disappointed. Why Kirsch should have won on paper, and why it felt flat. So Kirsch is supposed to be the one you don't bet against. He's a synth, who is cold, methodical, even detached, and built for precision. And from the first moment we saw him, he wasn't reacting like a soldier or a mercenary. He was calculating. Every look, every step, every word carried that I've already run this simulation energy. That's what made him so intimidating leading up to this fight. And it wasn't just a vibe. He's been watching everyone like they were test subjects. Morrow, Slightly, Smee, even Wendy. He's not emotional about it. He just logs their behavior, sees how the variables play out, and then adjusts when he feels like it. And if that means someone has to die, then so be it. So when Morrow finally storms into his space, Kirsch doesn't flinch. For a second it felt like he was unaware of what was going on, and then he just turns around and starts firing, like a machine that already had the next input queued, which makes the audience feel like this is someone who knew this was coming. And now that I think about it, maybe he just has good reflexes. Anyways, so on paper, that should have been the end of it. A cyborg hand and a short fuse against a full-on synthetic. You'd think Kirsch wins that matchup 10 times out of 10. He had the tactical edge, the composure, and the foresight. Even the way the ambush plays out reinforces it. He isn't caught scrambling. He's prepared, armed, and he's already moving with that same cold precision we've seen from him all season. And that's why the fight falls so flat. Because he didn't dominate. He didn't even come close. I mean, I guess he had a bit of an edge right at the beginning, but all of that setup and all of that looming presence just collapses almost as soon as the fight starts. So instead of a duel where his precision gets tested against Morrow's raw will, it feels like Kirsch gets swatted down too quickly. Now, to be very clear, this isn't downplaying Morrow. He's no pushover. This is the same man who survived the Maginot and clawed his way through absolute chaos. He's stubborn, aggressive, and built like someone who refuses to stay down. So yes, on instinct alone, you expect him to put up a fight. But the way Kirsch collapses so fast makes the whole showdown feel off balance. Because look at what the setup promised. We'd been conditioned to believe Kirsch was the chess player in the room, and the guy who's always 3 moves ahead. And when you put that kind of character up against a blunt force personality like Morrow, the natural expectation is a drawn-out clash where strategy meets brute strength. So it makes sense that you want to see Kirsch's cold calculations actually get tested. And of course you want to watch Morrow grind him down and see if stubborn will can really break the machine. Instead, the scales tip too fast. Kirsch doesn't look like he's adapting in real time. He looks like he's malfunctioning. And that shift undercuts the very thing the fight was supposed to prove. Morrow's hammer and the only memorable line. So from what we've seen so far, Morrow has never been the type to sit back and calculate. He doesn't run simulations in his head, and he doesn't necessarily measure outcomes. He just storms into a room and bends it to his will. That's been his entire style, and that's his instinct, aggression, and dominance. And in this fight, that approach takes its clearest form when he drops the John Henry story. And in case you don't know the story, John Henry was a railroad worker from American folklore. The legend goes that he raced against a steam drill to prove man was stronger than machine, which he won, but of course the effort killed him. So when Morrow brings that up, it's not just a random line. He's casting himself as the man who can outlast a machine, even if it breaks him. And I kind of like that reference because it showed good writing. So suddenly, this isn't just two men throwing each other into tables. Morrow reframes the whole battle. It's not Synth versus Cyborg or a man versus machine anymore. It's willpower versus technology. And by planting himself in that story, Morrow makes his point that he's the hammer and no amount of circuitry is going to break him. But don't forget, in the actual story, John Henry dies. He proves his point against the machine, but it costs him his life. So when Morrow declares that man will always win, it's not exactly the inspirational victory cry he thinks it is. If anything, it foreshadows his own self-destructive streak, and the way he'll throw himself at the machine no matter the cost, even if it breaks him in the process. The kids changed the game, but did they save it? Just when you think the fight has burned itself out, Slightly and Smee walk in, and this is where the balance of power changes completely. Kirsch is broken but still calculating, and he assumes they'll help him. He even tosses them a rope, expecting backup, but what he gets is betrayal. Smee doesn't hesitate. He shrugs, takes the rope, and uses it on Kirsch instead. And when Kirsch asks what he's doing, Smee drops the line that changes the whole show's hierarchy. Your time is done. It's our time now. That's not just a throwaway comment. It's a direct foreshadow of Wendy's later declaration, now we rule. The kids aren't pawns anymore. They're not just running errands for adults, being manipulated as leverage, or stumbling into someone else's plan. This moment marks the point where they seize control of the story for themselves. Kirsch and Morrow both came in thinking they were the ones driving events, but the kids are the ones who walk away with the power. Slightly, too, has his own breakthrough here. For most of the season, he's been trapped in the role of a desperate child, scheming, cornered, trying to save his mom by playing games that were always too big for him. But in this moment, we finally see him shift. He grabs the containment canisters meant for the smaller aliens, claiming tools that once symbolized adult control. And when Morrow wakes and pleads by saying, "I didn't hurt your mother," Slightly doesn't crumble. He doesn't even retreat into fear. Instead, we see the hardening that comes with everything he's been through. This is Slightly's first step toward adulthood, not because he wanted it, but because the weight of betrayal and violence forced him there. On a thematic level, it works beautifully. The kids rise up and flip the hierarchy. The entire story has been circling the tension between adults who treat children as assets and children who are desperate for agency. This moment declares, loud and clear, that the agency now belongs to the younger generation. Smee and Slightly make that shift tangible in a way even Wendy's leadership couldn't fully sell until now. But here's the problem. Narratively, it hijacks the fight. Everything that had been building between Kirsch and Morrow gets shoved aside. The brawl doesn't end because one outsmarts the other. It ends because the kids step in and redirect the spotlight. And while that's a strong story beat on its own, it comes at the expense of the clash we were promised. Think about it. Fans waited all season to see these two titans finally go at it. Instead, their fight gets cut off midstream so the kids can claim the stage. It works thematically, but as a payoff, it feels like a cheat. What this fight really means beyond the disappointment. When the dust settles, the truth is simple. Neither man wins. Kirsch is broken on the ground, his back shattered, his voice reduced to glitching static. Morrow is unconscious, drained from his burst of raw willpower. One is crippled, the other is down cold, and neither of them leaves with control. That's the core of it. This clash wasn't about crowning a victor. It was about exposing the limits of both men's philosophies. Kirsch, the cold experimenter, obsessed with procedure and precision, discovers that control can collapse in an instant. Morrow, the brute force enforcer, running on instinct and dominance, proves that willpower can break through. But it doesn't necessarily keep you standing. So both ideals fall short, and that's why the fight feels so strange. On the surface, it's disappointing. After all that build-up, it didn't deliver the kind of decisive payoff fans expected. We were waiting for a definitive clash that would settle who really had the upper hand. But instead, the battle fizzled into collapse. But their clash also cleared the stage for a new order. The Lost Boys are the ones who end this finale in control. It's their story now. So when you look back at the fight through that lens, the disappointment starts to make sense. The show wasn't interested in giving us a grand duel. It was interested in clearing two pieces off the board so the spotlight could shift. And then there's the bigger, looming shadow. Yutani's troops are already inbound. That's the storm waiting on the horizon. So even if this fight didn't land as the climax we wanted, it sets up something much larger. Because Season 2 isn't going to be about Kirsch outsmarting or Morrow overpowering. They've already been sidelined. The real question is, what happens when the kids' new rule collides with the unstoppable machinery of Wayland Yutani? That's the note the finale leaves us on. A clash that looks like a letdown on the surface, but in hindsight, clears the stage for the next chapter. Kirsch and Morrow prove their limits. The kids claim the spotlight, and the corporate giants are on their way.